Hi. After a brief hiatus, I was up in New York for 2 weeks. Richard Bey Talk is back. Thank you so much for joining me, as well as Albert Reinoso, who is the
Good to be
producer.
back.
Yes, it's good to be back. Now, Albert, you do not follow politics, so yeah, you
Well,
didn't see the Herschel Walker Reverend Warnock debate, right?
I'm on a politics hiatus right now because it's too crazy. But I follow politics and news, but it's just been too much for me. No, I don't really know much about the Walker thing.
All right. Well, yeah, I have to say that Herschel Walker has inspired me. You remember that during the debate, he pulled out his badge, right? We have that picture of
That I
him with
heard.
the
Yes,
badge.
I can get that picture for you now.
And during the there he is, Officer Herschel Walker. He told soldiers at an army camp that he was an FBI agent. Of course, that's not true. He also said on the campaign trail many times that he was a member of law enforcement, and that's not true. But he did pull out the badge, which he has now said, I picked it up somewhere in Georgia. But I have been inspired because this is something almost nobody knows. And I am a law enforcement agent too. When I was about 11 or 12 years old, I sent an application in to the United Network Command for Law and Enforcement. You may remember it as the Man from U.N.C.L.E. And they sent me an official badge, just like Herschel Walker, and a membership card, the UNCLE. So I am a law enforcement agent too, the United Network Command for Law and Enforcement, which I think is, an organization for law enforcement that's as prestigious as the one Herschel Walker represents. Now he said he was an FBI agent. He said he was a law enforcement agent all these different times, and they had this debate. And I mean, there are so many things. This guy has admitted that he has 12 different personalities with something called associative personality disorder, which is what Sybil had. The Three Faces of Eve are movies that covered this, that are sometimes you'll see serial killers and, they dress up as women. They think they're women. They think they're children. They think they're, oh, there was one movie that was just really incredible where the guy had about 10 different personalities. And by the end of the movie, you realize all these actors that you've been watching are just versions of his personality. Now, did they ask him much about this? No. He said at one time he's admitted it. He'll be a spokesperson for mental health, but he just got over it. You don't get over that. And I wonder what his pronouns are. I mean, should we refer to him as them and they, or he? There was also this controversy about a woman who came forward, one of the several women with whom he has fathered children. Some of them he kept secret. He kept saying, I'm the most transparent person you could because I wrote a book. But he had all these sons and he never revealed it. And I don't know whether even now he has 4 or 5, because this new one that came out, is she one of the other 4, or is this the 5th? And she has a canceled check. She says that he sent her to get an abortion. She has the receipt from the abortion clinic. She has a get well card that he sent her. And the moderator, a guy named Buck Lanford, who's the sportscaster for a Fox station in Georgia, just the person you need to do a political interview. He said, well, what are the circumstances behind this? And Walker just said, it's a lie. That's the answer. It's a lie. Is the guy fit? I don't know. Is he fit to be in Congress? I mean, they could have asked him or given him that famous test and asked him to repeat person, woman, man, camera, TV. I mean, that proves that your cognitive ability is together. Now, this is not the only case where cognitive ability is a political issue. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But, you know, everybody has to admit that the expectations were so low. Herschel Walker did not pull out a gun and put it at Reverend Walker's head as he did with his girlfriends and ex-wife. He did not start telling a story about a priapic bull and the 4 cows that he impregnated and the 3 more that he wanted to have something going on with. I would, like everybody else, I was expecting some sort of outrageous meltdown. And other than pulling out the badge on the stage, which was against the rules of the debate, to bring a prop on. And he kept saying, it's not a prop, it's real, it's real. I mean, you know, there were none of those meltdowns that we all expected. So in that case, the debate was a success for him. But he had an even better debate right after that on Sunday night, because they had another debate scheduled and he didn't show up. So they had an empty podium, which was even more impressive than his performance. It had low expectations too. One thing you don't probably know is that according the Walker campaign at first requested that if they were going to have a debate, they should have all the questions before the debate. Well, before that debate, they did get all the topics because that was in the contract that they signed. All the contracts would be revealed. Now, didn't Donna Brazile get in a lot of trouble for not giving Hillary Clinton the questions, but the topic? She said, they're going to say something about the death penalty. Oh, but for Herschel Walker, you know, that's okay before a debate. All right. So the other situation about cognitive ability was provoked by like one sentence that's been played over and over again and repeated over and over again. And it's from a very young and attractive NBC correspondent, fairly new to the game, who was assigned the interview with John Fetterman, who had a stroke several months back. Now, he does have auditory problems processing what he hears in terms of words. So when he was interviewed, he does have a screen that prints it out. And, you know, I watched the whole interview. And with one exception where he said emphatic and then corrected himself and he meant empathic, he seemed perfectly fine to me and together. And others who have talked to him have said, no, there's not a problem, you know, with his thinking. There's a problem with his hearing, putting the words together when he hears something, but he can read perfectly well. And he is getting better. But this NBC reporter started the interview, at least in the broadcast, by saying this.
Lester, in small talk before the interview, without captioning, it wasn't clear he was understanding our conversation.
It wasn't in small talk before. First of all, this woman, I mean, she's certainly telegenic, but she has the most annoying voice. And it's, well, before the interview, I don't know whether it's nasal or in the back or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't.
And Lester, in small talk before the interview, without captioning, it wasn't clear he was understanding our conversation.
Yeah, well, you know, it's hard to understand the way you speak. maybe you should get some elocution lessons, placement, for how you speak. But, that's been a big controversy all week. And, just from that, one statement. And we'll see what happens. These races are so close. Every time I look at the internet, there's another race that's either one. In Illinois, the poll came out and showed that the Democrat, who is an admiral, was 3 points behind Grassley, who's like 90 years old. And in Oklahoma, a Democrat may be elected governor, and Oz is catching up on Fetterman. And I mean, boy, this could drive you crazy every day. And I've sort of created a list of candidates where I say, well, this person could win, and this person with a little bit more help could win. And those are the people I send my money to. Unfortunately, here in Florida, it does seem like Val Demings is going to lose to Marco Rubio, and Charlie Crist, who had a very little chance of beating our governor here, DeSantis, or Governor DeSantis. That too seems to be a lost cause. But I'll tell you this, once you donate money, your text message box. Richard, can I talk to Richard? Sorry for bothering you. Richard, would it be possible? Is there anything I can say that could get you to donate $25? Every time I go to text messages and it goes ding, 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 and I go to see who's sending me something, it's another politician asking for money. The other big story of the week was the January 6th committee. And it was what many people assume is going to be their final convention. And boy, as far as I'm concerned, it was a knockout again. Every one of them has been revelatory and on the edge of your seat, gripping as you're watching it. There's always something. But in this particular one, the thing that struck me was that all these emails from the Secret Service that knew a violent attack on the Capitol was going to happen. I mean, God, there were so many of them. They've got guns. They're coming to attack the Capitol. They're saying they're going to do this. They're going to stop this. They're after the politicians. And I mean, I've heard some people say this should have been handled by DHS. And the DHS is, of course, under Trump's control and a Trump appointment. But they didn't do anything when they had these text messages and emails from late December. Tony Ornato is no longer, he quit the Secret Service after having this double job where he worked for Trump in the White House as well as working for the Secret Service. But man, they got to clean that place out. And that seemed obvious. So, and then there was tape of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and other senators and representatives who were hiding from the protesters, who said they were going to hang them, they were going to kill them, they were going to string them up. And it was riveting video. It was taken by Nancy Pelosi's daughter. At one point, Nancy Pelosi said, "The word is that Trump is going to come to Congress, that he's leading the mob," which of course is what he wanted to do. She said, "If he comes here, I'm going to punch him." Well, what is she, like 4'11", and he's 6'2"? If she punched him, she'd punch him right in the testicles, which might be more effective than anything else. And of course, there's criticisms of the January 6th committee. Chris Christie on Sunday with George Stephanopoulos had this criticism of the January 6th committee.
I think the January 6th committee, despite some of the really good work they've done, and I agree with Julie on some of the bringing out of facts that they've done, was resigned to having a credibility problem because of the membership of the committee and the way that was done. And so there are lots of Republicans across this country who just say, there's nobody there to argue the other side. Kinzinger and Cheney don't argue the other side to the extent that there is some arguments there.
But there's no
What is the other side, Chris?
Hey, look, I think that you can question a lot of these witnesses who came up and test their credibility, Donna.
Bill Barr?
Well,
you're going to test the credibility of the former
listen,
Attorney General? You're going to test the credibility of the people who were inside the Oval Office
there are a lot of
advising
people,
the president? You're going to test the credibility?
Donna, you want to just keep talking, or you want me to,
seriously,
you want me to
Chris,
give the answer?
What is the other side?
You can test the credibility of people, and by doing that, it can give them more credibility. But instead, it's a TV production.
Yeah, you're going to test the credibility of the cops who got their heads smashed in.
No, that's
who you're going to test?
No, that's not who I'm testing, Donna. But there are lots of people inside the White House who now have convenient memories about things that didn't have memories about them before. You can ask questions about that. But
how do you know they didn't have memories of it before? They weren't questioned about it before. And the hypocrisy and the irony of this. Do you remember this guy? Former federal prosecutor. Do you remember the Republican National Convention that nominated Donald Trump in 2016? This guy was an actual former federal prosecutor who stood in front of a howling mob and held a kangaroo court, putting Hillary Clinton on trial, and led the audience. He didn't say it himself, but this screaming mob shouting, "Lock her up, lock her up." His jury of 5,000 people screaming, "Lock her up." Where was the other side there, Mr. Christie? And not only that, he convicted her of so many different crimes in front of this, this Jacobin howling mob screaming for the blood of Queen Hillary. And Trump promised, I'm going to appoint a special prosecutor and we're going to get Hillary Clinton. No special prosecutor. He had 4 years to do it. Over the course of the Trump administration, what did you have? 3 or 4 different attorney generals? Each one of them could have prosecuted Hillary Clinton. Nothing. Hillary Clinton has never even received a parking ticket. And the ultimate irony, of course, is that Donald Trump is guilty of having top secret information that he was not authorized to have. She had it on her computer server in Chappaqua. But this is Chris Christie, who created a kangaroo court with a howling mob out for blood, talking about how, well, we have to hear the other side. And then there was Mike Smerconish, an old friend of mine, but, Mike got the word at CNN that you have to be fair and balanced. So on his show, I used to watch his show every week. I thought he had the best show on CNN and possibly one of the best shows of all the weekend news shows, because he's bright and because he wasn't doctrinaire. But now his Sunday show, now that the word came down, you can't say the big lie anymore. And now that Don Lemon has been demoted and Brian Stelter has been fired and everybody's going, oh, what's going to happen to my job? All of a sudden, his guests are, to talk about Fetterman. He had a columnist from the New York Post. A few weeks ago, he had the pollster from the Trafalgar Group to talk about how the Republicans were going to win everything and the other polls are wrong. He's had, I'd have to, go through the list, but more and more, he's just bringing people on. Even the emails that he takes during the show, or the text messages, seem to be more conservative. But anyway, he was on Bill Maher, and he had something to say about the January 6th committee, too. He had his criticism. This was it.
mistake. Donald Trump should have been the first witness subpoenaed, not the last witness subpoenaed. I don't think he'll ever testify. And I don't say that for an applause line. I say it because he's going to run out the clock. Republicans probably will take control of the House of Representatives, and this investigation is going to go away.
What were they applauding? That is such a stupid idea. Of course, this is not a trial, but even in a trial, you don't put the defendant on first in a trial. Not only that, until they do their investigation and they uncover the facts and testimony reveals what was going on, how do you even know what to ask him? Now, Mike knows as well as I do, if you had subpoenaed him in the beginning, he still wouldn't show up. And he won't show up now. And the Department of Justice has refused to issue subpoenas for Mark Meadows and some of the other people who were in the White House. They wouldn't be issuing indictment, not a subpoena. They wouldn't be indicting Donald Trump for not coming before the committee. That's just ridiculous. It's just a way to to stir up controversy. I think the January 6th committee has done a stellar job. And I've seen every one of their sessions from beginning to end. All right. Now, I spend some time on conservative websites, and I spend some time on conservative message boards, and I spend some time talking to people. And there are a lot of things. People always say, well, there's so many Americans that believe that the last election was rigged. They'll say things like, oh, Joe Biden is president, but they won't say that he was elected president in a legitimate election. That's what they won't say. But there's so many other things that are common knowledge. Everyone knows that are really uncommon knowledge. That's what I'm going to tell you about right now. Uncommon knowledge. All right. So I'm on a radio show in New York, a friend of mine, and we're talking about the threat of nuclear war. That's another thing. They went hog wild criticizing Joe Biden for saying that we're closer to Armageddon than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, and people say, oh, he used the word Armageddon. Well, isn't everybody saying that, yes, that we don't know what Putin will do and that we can't say yes or no whether he will use nuclear weapons or not. Tactical nuclear weapons if he uses them there. Okay. So I'm on a radio show and the host says something that I've heard over and over again. Russia has the second most number of nuclear weapons. I've heard newscasters on TV say that. Well, after the United States, they're number 2. No, it's time for uncommon knowledge. Russia is number 1. Russia has more nuclear weapons than the United States. They have over 6,000, a couple of hundred into 6,000. We have 5,500. China has 350, which I think points out how many do you actually need? Other countries, United Kingdom has 220. Pakistan and India are pretty evenly matched with 150, 160. Israel has 90. All right. But no, we're number 2. So what? Well, the idea is that I hear it over and over again, and it's not true. Here's another one. Why does the United States have open borders? Open borders. Do you know that in 2021, we turned back immediately over 1 million people? We turned back even now over 100,000 a month. We're on track to turn back over 1 million people and send them back to Mexico right when they get to the border. Does that sound like an open border to you? The next time somebody says that to you, tell them we don't have open borders. We've never had, well, we have had open borders, but 100 years ago. And we don't have them under Joe Biden. The other one is, we've got to drill for more oil. We've got to be energy independent. Well, if energy independent means we don't import oil, well, that hasn't been true since 1940. If it means we export more energy than we import, we've been energy independent for a couple years, and we're still energy independent. We remain energy independent today. We export more energy than we import. And here's another one. You know, people generally think Saudi Arabia is the number one producer of oil in the world. No, the United States is number one in oil production, not Saudi Arabia. And then people say, well, you know, under Trump, we drilled so much oil. Well, we had 11.3 million barrels per day in 2020. We have 11.7 million barrels per day in 2022. And next year, the United States will produce more oil than any year in the history of our country. 12.4 million barrels will be produced. And this is not an estimate from, you know, some Democratic source. It's from the oil industry. 12.4 million barrels of oil per day will be produced in 2023, as opposed to 11.3 million barrels per day in 2020. Now, there was an estimate, you know, earlier in the year that we'd produce even more than that, 12.7 million, but 12.3, that's a historic record for oil production. We're going to be breaking records. And here's one more thing where people say, well, the Republicans just want to drill. Well, some of them do, and some of them say, drill, but not in my backyard. Marco Rubio and Rick Scott, the two senators from Florida, have a piece of legislation where they want a permanent end to any exploratory, not an end, a prohibition on any exploratory wells in the Gulf of Mexico, you know, off the west coast of Florida, far out. You know, they don't want to look at these oil wells all the way out. I lived in California, and I went to the University of California at Santa Barbara. And, you know, we had a really beautiful beach there, which also had an oil spill at times. I mean, the thing that I remember most about attending that college was that the smell in the morning of eucalyptus and oil spill. But we were pumping oil in California. We were pumping oil off the coast of Santa Barbara, and on this beautiful beach, you could see the rigs out there. All right, enough about the news. This week, I had a friend take me to a comedy showcase. And most of it was pretty mad, but there was one guy. Here he is. His name is Philly Plowder. Philly Plowder was a comedian. All right. Now, when he started the show, he's one of these guys that comes out and does this riff on the audience, right? So he's saying, oh, this guy, look over here. He looks like his wife dragged him here, and he's not too happy to be here. And he comes to my table, and he sees me with my glasses. And he points to me and says, oh, look down here. There's Elton John with his husband. So anyway, he was really funny. Very, very, very gifted comedian. And halfway through his set, he looks down and he goes, you look like Richard Bey. You're Richard Bey, aren't you? You're Richard Bey. And I said, yeah, I'm Richard Bey. He goes, oh my God. And he was very complimentary. And he said, you're the man, and blah, blah, blah. He said, what are you doing now? And I said, it's a long story. And he said, oh, you're just chilling, man. Right. So anyway, it pointed out to me once again, I started out as an actor, and being an actor, it's an ephemeral creation. I mean, we remember Shakespeare for 400 years. Who remembers Richard Burbage, who played Hamlet? I mean, you ask people about the great figures of the stage from 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Nobody knows who they are. We know Cyrano de Bergerac. How many people remember Walter Hamden, who was the great American Cyrano, and so many others? So television is like that too. How many Americans remember Arthur Godfrey, Dave Garroway? Who were some of the others? Jack Parr. I bet you some of the young people, they don't even know who Johnny Carson was. So, when you're on television and it's over, it's as ephemeral as being an actor in the theater. I mean, you still have your tapes. But you don't sit at home watching your old shows, So somebody recognizes you, and yeah, it feels good. They remembered what you did. They enjoyed it. They're complimentary. Now, in New York, we had someone who broke all records for the longest running talk show, and he happened to be a personal friend of mine. Every time I'd see him, he'd go, Richard, to make it in this business, you have to have sincerity. And once you fake it, you've got it made. Say the same thing over every time, like it was the first time he thought of the joke. I was in an off-Broadway play, and he actually came to see it twice. And I went to the stage manager and I said, oh my God, I can't believe Joe came to see my play. He liked it so much, he came back and saw it twice. The stage manager said, yeah, he slept through it both times. I was looking at him out in the audience. Well, on my first job in television, I got to spend some time with Joe Franklin. That's where I first met him. And this was on WCBS 1981 or 82, somewhere around there. And if any of you watching remember Joe Franklin, I mean, I think you'll get a kick out of seeing this piece.
This may look like the home of a bedraggled bag lady, but it's really the executive office of a man who this month is celebrating his 30th year in broadcasting. To some, he's a cult figure. To others, he's a little bit corny. But if you're a television insomniac, you know he's just Joe Franklin. Joe Franklin holds the world's record for the longest-running talk show in the history of television.
I think the reason I've endured is because I don't take this business seriously. I know that if I'm wined and dined and romanced, which I am, it's not me. They want the microphone, they want the camera, they want the plug. Okay, let me say good morning. Whether it's about 6 o'clock in the morning or about 2 o'clock in the morning, we're going to give you what I think is going to be a fascinating kind of a show. And to make it kind of a fascinating day for me, I'm just going to tell you in a very low-key fashion that today marks my 30th anniversary in TV. So let's hear it from me, okay? How I become a cult figure? I think it's by virtue of the fact that I'm still there.
The headquarters for Joe Franklin's TV empire is located in New York's Times Square, where Joe keeps his rather cluttered executive office.
Okay.
So what day does the maid come in, Joe?
Well, we had her last time about 1903, I think.
It really looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, at least I know the order of my disorder.
Joe's office may be a mess, but out of this disarray has come an impressive array of stars. According to Joe, he gave the first ever TV exposure to stars like Liza Minnelli and Barbra Streisand. But where are those stars today, Joe?
Most don't come back, because I symbolize to most, I didn't mean to get this heavy, but I epitomize to most the time when they were down, when they were down. And when they see me, I represent the time when they were down and out. So when they see me, they run away. Most do not come back. But Barbra Streisand is one of maybe 3 or 4 who do come back because she's nice.
And his favorite guest of all time was Bing Crosby.
First you put your 2 knees close up tight, and then you wiggle to the left, and then you wiggle to the right. Where the blue of the
We did a whole hour. And when he walked toward me, I just melted. You know, I always thought of Bing as being mechanically reproduced. He was my idol, except for Bing Crosby, except for Eddie Cantor.
Nostalgia and stars of the past are Joe Franklin's specialty. His show was once called Joe Franklin's Memory Lane, and today he sees his extensive collection of memorabilia as a comfort.
It's a lonely business. I have no friends. I don't have one single friend. My friends are the old records and the old movies. I go home at night and turn on the projector, and with me, it's always 1934.
And how does Joe Franklin want to be remembered?
As somebody who looked into the back alleys, not just on Broadway, for the same 6 or 8 stars that you get tired of interviewing, and somebody who was nice. I always said, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice.
Joe Franklin, you're on TV 30
When I was a little boy, I used to sit down in front of the TV set and watch Joe Franklin. You know, he's been on for 30 years this year.
30 years?
Do you think we'll be on in 30 years, you and I, doing Two in the Town?
I'll be doing Two in the Town in 30 years. Richard, I don't know about you.
That'll be the year 2012. It's a long way off, but we'll be right back.
And of course, I wasn't doing Two in the Town. I only did it for 1 year. That little Media Machiavelli, she married one of the newscasters on the station, and the two of them went to management and said, let's do it as a couple. And Bey got bounced. So, but I bounced to better places. I went to Philadelphia for 4 years and came back to Channel 9 for another 10 years, then landed on talk radio. Actually, I worked in broadcasting until 2009. So I was a little short of those 30 years. I guess it was 27 years, if you include talk radio. Now, when Joe Franklin died, I had the honor of delivering one of the eulogies at his memorial service, along with Curtis Lewa, who was also there, at a synagogue in Hell's Kitchen. So Joe Franklin was a nice guy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you will subscribe. I hope you will share this with your friends. I hope you enjoyed it, most of all. And I hope we'll all be back here again next week for another edition of Richard Bey Talk. In the meantime, all my best. Take care.